Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dennis Prager Show. The column of the day belongs to Charles Krauthammer. It summarizes the inauguration and the administration of Barack Obama perfectly. And it states in his inimitable way what I have been speaking about for 4 years, and that is that there is indeed a transformation, a fundamental transformation of the United States taking place. When I read about the number of people who have now come to be dependent upon government for support as compared to the past, whereas you will hear when I read parts of this, wherein people depended upon neighbors, churches, charitable associations. We were known throughout our history for creating these social creations, these social groups to which we affiliated as Americans because we knew that the government was not there to take care of us. It was there to protect us from foreign enemies and to be a place of last resort for a host of things in life. But we were founded not to depend on government. It is not a statement about patriotism to say that the president's values are un-American. Doesn't make him un-American. Doesn't make him anything less than a lover of America as he understands it. I don't challenge people's patriotism or love. I never challenge people's feelings in any event. And I certainly don't challenge his sincerity. He's a believing leftist, just as there are believing Christians, believing Jews, etc. He is a believing leftist. Leftism is not an American value system. It may be, in fact, the leftist would believe it's better. That's fine. I respect that. But if clarity matters any longer, it is an undoing of the American Revolution so that we could be like others where you have more and more people depending upon the state. For 4 years, I've been telling you that we have the most left-wing president in American history. Now the left-wing media are in agreement. This is how Krauthammer begins his column. The media herd is stunned to discover that Barack Obama is a man of the left after 699 teleprompted presidential speeches. That's a lot. 699 teleprompted presidential speeches. The commentariat was apparently still oblivious until Monday's inaugural address, that is. Remember I read to you the headlines from the newspapers, LA Times, New York Times? Liberal address given by the president. Where has everyone been these 4 years, asks Krauthammer. The only surprise is that Obama chose his second inaugural, generally an occasion for, quote, malice toward none, ecumenism, to unveil so uncompromising a left-liberal manifesto. But the substance was no surprise. After all, Obama had unveiled his transformational agenda in his first address to Congress 4 years ago. It was, I wrote at the time, this is Krauthammer writing at the time, the boldest social democratic manifesto ever issued by a U.S. president. Nor was it mere talk. Obama went on to essentially nationalize health care, 18% of the U.S. economy. Please assimilate that, my friends, what Obamacare is. It's essentially nationalizing health care. As God is my witness, I believe you will get worse health care, and it will merely increase corruption, as all large things tend to do. It is a tragedy beyond words, the Obamacare passage. It was a fluke of history, thanks to the Minnesota election, which only God knows who won. Thanks to a sleight of hand in the way the election went, since Scott Brown was elected even by Massachusetts to undo Obamacare. And the ultimate evasion was when the Supreme Court, at the last minute, decided to uphold its constitutionality, thanks to Chief Justice Roberts, who did not want the Supreme Court to receive the odium of the general press. Obama went on to essentially nationalize health care, 18% of the U.S. economy, after passing an $833 billion stimulus that precipitated an unprecedented expansion of government spending. By the White House's own reckoning, Washington, please hear this, my friends, Washington now spends 24% of GDP. That's the entire economy of the United States. Now 1% less than a quarter is now Washington. And it is only increasing, folks. It is 1/5 higher than the post-war norm of 20%. All under one man. We've gone from 20 to 24% of the economy. And it's, as I said, that's before Obamacare kicked in. Obama's ambitions were derailed by the 2010 midterm shellacking that cost him the House. But now that he's won again, the revolution is back, as announced in Monday's inaugural address. It was a paean to big government. At its heart was Obama's pledge to, 1, defend unyieldingly the 20th century welfare state, and 2, expand it unrelentingly for the 21st. The first part of that agenda, clinging zealously to the increasingly obsolete structures of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, is the very definition of reactionary liberalism. Social Security was created when life expectancy was 62. Think about that. Think about that. And the Democrats and the left oppose any increase in age for eligibility. 62 when it was passed. So people didn't even live, on average, to receive Social Security. As far as I'm concerned, it should be at least 70. But no. Then they may not win. See, the more Americans dependent upon the government, the more voters the Democrats have. Why do you want to lose any of your people? Today's radically different demographics and technology have rendered these programs, as structured, unsustainable. Everyone knows that unless reformed, they will swallow up the rest of the budget. As for the second part, enlargement, Obama had already begun that in his first term with Obamacare. Monday's inaugural address reinstated yet another grand Obama project, healing the planet. It promised a state-created green energy sector, massively subsidized, and while the state systematically squeezes fossil fuels, killing coal today and shale gas tomorrow. I spoke to you yesterday about how Bjorn Lomborg, who is an environmentalist from Denmark, who does believe in global warming caused by carbon emissions. He believes in that. And he still pointed out that the president, what did he call it, exaggerated in his inaugural address with regard to, what was it, with regard to hurricanes / storms, drought, and fire. In each case, what the president said was not true. Not true. It wasn't exaggeration. It wasn't true. But please understand, truth is not a left-wing value. That does not mean that every person on the left lies. Okay? I know that the Pavlovian response to what I said is to say Prager called everybody on the left a liar. Of course I didn't. There are liars on the left, there are liars on the right, there are truth-tellers on the left, there are truth-tellers on the right. But as a value of leftism, it is not up there. Egalitarianism is more important. Expansion of government is more important than truth. Getting rid of fossil fuels is more important than truth. Folks, it is very difficult to overstate the problems. Let me put it to you this way, and it's only a little a little exaggerated. Many Americans now fear the American government more than North Korea does. You are listening to the Dennis Prager Show.
Were you lying then? Are you lying now? Or are you not, in fact, a chronic and habitual liar?
This segment is brought to you by Pragertopia, where you can podcast The Dennis Prager Show and listen to it anytime and anywhere you want. Go to www.pragertopia.com to subscribe.
Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here, praying for my country. I've been broadcasting 30 years. If I had a reputation of overstating, I wouldn't have been on 30 years, or I wouldn't have had many listeners. Very early in my career, I decided that exaggerating is great the first 100 times. But beyond that, people start taking what you say with a grain of salt. So I've been very careful to understate. People speak about my calm when I talk to people I differ with, and I've cultivated that. So when I tell you that the left is leading this country to ruin, it is not meant in any way as an exaggeration, not even meant as an emotional point. Basically, whatever it touches is led to ruin. I was thinking about that. Did anybody comment on the poem that was read at the inaugural address? Uncommented on. I heard the poem, and it struck me as an inferior piece of work. But you realize, first, the odds are he was chosen in some sort of affirmative action, not obviously stated as such. Being, what was he, Hispanic in this case? In the case of the Cuban ancestry. People of Cuban ancestry could write the greatest poetry and write junk, obviously. But I was thinking about what area of life that the left has touched has not had its standards ruined. And I can't think of any. I was thinking about poetry, and I was thinking about classical music, and I was thinking about art and government. And now I read this article in today's Los Angeles Times. The biggest, agents, the biggest talent agency in Hollywood. This is a front page article in the calendar section of today's Los Angeles Times. The bash thrown by Hollywood's powerful creative artists agency on Sunday night took festival revelry. This is at the Sundance Festival in Utah, one of the most prestigious film festivals. Took an unexpectedly bawdy direction as Sundance guests mingled with lingerie-clad women pretending to snort prop cocaine, erotic dancers outfitted with sex toys, and an Alice in Wonderland look-alike performing a simulated sex act on a man in a rabbit costume.
Oh my goodness! What's wrong with that?
Yeah, well, they don't know. They don't think there's anything wrong with it. The Hollywood is, of course, one of the left-wing bubbles of society. The university is another. The White House is another. But Hollywood, obviously, is such. To most people in Hollywood, to the people who run Hollywood, obviously, this is not problematic. They might say a few things, but the bar is always lowered. See, those of us who believe in traditional Judeo-Christian values, there is a set of standards. We all fail by those standards, but we still believe that they exist, and if we fail, then we have sinned. We're not hypocrites for failing the standards that we advocate. We are what traditional religion would call sinners. The word sinner has, of course, been removed from the generally used vocabulary of the American people, as you well know. So has the word sin. Even good and evil don't have much use any longer. And while I have libertarian views vis-a-vis private sexual matters, this is public. This is it. I would not read to you, and I never have. I don't even talk about sex scandals. What people do privately, their sins, is not my business, generally speaking, even as a broadcaster. But when the largest talent agency at one of the most prestigious film festivals does this, it's worthy of comment. Because bringing down, there is an inevitability almost of the deterioration of values unless they are reaffirmed every generation. And there is a sense among many Americans that we are sinking. Those Americans, however, who judge the society by the bigness of the state think that we are getting better. Do you think, it is an interesting question, does the average editor of the New York Times think the country is going in the right direction? Would you say so? Yeah. Yeah. No. All right. No, that's a fascinating. We live, you must understand, we live in different worlds. I have much more in common with a conservative in Romania, a conservative who holds, obviously, my values. A Romanian who holds my values is closer to me than the New York Times editorial page writers. And, oh, our God, that's a perfect example that Alan just mentioned. Our guide in Ecuador. We, by sheer chance, you don't know who your guide will be, but we had hired a driver and a guide when in Ecuador last week, when we were on our cruise with listeners. By the way, next year's cruise has just finally been announced, and it's truly unique. It is not. I don't think it's been done before by a major line. May not be done again, and that is up the west coast of Africa. As I get older, I more and more love. I always loved it, but I even more so love seeing and talking to people. And I just can't wait for that cruise. The information is up at DennisPrager.com. We had a guide in Ecuador who exactly shared our values. She spoke very good English, and it just became clear. She was afraid of the increasing largesse of Latin American governments. She wanted government out of her life. She was an entrepreneurial type herself. Now, do I have more in common with her, or do I have more in common with the folks in the Hollywood left, the folks who give us our movies? This is a question that is simply rhetorical. Values are what matter. We have a country that it is as divided as it was in the Civil War. I'm not comparing the left to the South. I'm just saying the extent of the division is, if at least, as great as then. I'm Dennis Prager, 1-8-PRAGER-776. Adam Carolla has a new course at Prager University. Laugh and learn at PragerUniversity.com. Hello, everybody. Dennis Prager here. You know, I said during the election campaign that this would be, that the 2012 election would be the most important in modern American history, if not in American history. And I stand by it. The damage that this president is doing, not because he's a bad man, but because he's a leftist. Leftists do damage. Look at Europe. Look at the arts. Look at education. Look at the inner city. Where leftist ideas reign, misery ensues. Okay? That's what happens. But for people on the left, it's irrelevant because they mean well. And if it didn't work, if the Great Society and the trillions spent and the wars on poverty, etc., didn't work, in fact, made it worse for so many, doesn't matter. What you do is you spend more and have a bigger bureaucracy and have the human being even more controlled by laws that emanate from authorities above them. Charles Krauthammer on the inaugural address. Czech President and economist Václav Klaus once explained environmentalism is the successor to failed socialism as justification for all pervasive rule by a Politburo of experts. Only now it acts in the name of not the proletariat, but the planet. It was David Horowitz, I recall, who first made the point that environmentalism is a watermelon, green on the outside, red on the inside. And it is the successor to socialism for increased government control of people's lives and a reduction of the rights of the individual in the name of the planet. Folks, just remember, wisdom begins with fear of God. The older I get, the more I realize that the Bible is wiser than the New York Times editorial page. Of course, I knew that when I was 20, but it's just reaffirmed with every editorial and with every study of the Bible. But that's not what they study at college. I've reviewed for you some of the discussions I had with parents on the listener cruise. Wonderful, truly the best of the best, kind, hard-working people who were on the cruise and telling me, lamenting how they had lost their child values-wise, and in one case, lost their child. Child became so leftist after the second year of college that he stopped talking to the parents, which, as you know, in most cases, I consider to be a terrible evil. Also somewhat new in our society with the narcissism, the irony, the left-wing narcissism. Yes, it's under the guise of compassion and all of that, but the truth is it's just unleashed narcissism. You're not accountable to anybody but yourself. Look out for number one, self-esteem that is unearned. What do you think these things are if not prescriptions for narcissism? Krauthammer continues, Monday's address also served to disabuse the fantasists, that is those who believe in fantasy, of any Obama interest in fiscal reform or debt reduction. That's why it's so hard for conservatives to win in any country. They don't promise you anything except liberty. Right? We're not going to take care of you. You're going to take care of yourselves, and you're going to take care of your neighbors and your family. We're not. How do you win on that in democratic elections? Think about that. Think about the inherent disadvantage to a conservative running for office. I don't promise to give you more. Well, why should I vote for you? That's the way the left has raised now 2 generations of Americans. You don't vote on what's better for America. You vote on what's in it for me. And that famous question at what was it? It was George W. Bush and John Kerry. Was it then? Woman got up at a town hall meeting. What's in it for me if I vote for you? 1-8-PRAGER 776, The Dennis Prager Show. Dennis Prager here, 1-8-PRAGER 776. Trying to clarify every day so that you can then use these clarities in talking to people in your life. I have modified my old recommendation that you not talk politics with your family. But let me explain the modification. I still think that at holiday meals, for example, get-togethers like that, you avoid politics. I do. That's how important I think family love has to be. But there is a modification as a result of one of my seagoing listeners, Barry Wolf, and a longtime friend, who made the point publicly after one of my lectures on board the ship that I should rethink parent-child, and I agree with him. While obviously you want to retain the love with your children, the parent's role never really fully ends. And your first task is not to be loved. Your first task is to provide guidance and wisdom to the best of your ability. Doesn't mean every time your kid calls or visits you talk politics if you differ in politics. But it does mean that you're allowed to say calmly and lovingly what you feel. If you have to walk on eggshells with your own child, that's not a good thing. But it's now the task of everybody, to the best of their ability, to make the case. The American experiment, and it's an experiment, is in danger. I finish some of the reading from Krauthammer. Monday's address, as I read to you, also served to disabuse the fantasists of any Obama interest in fiscal reform or debt reduction. The speech was spectacularly devoid of any acknowledgement of the central threat to the post-industrial democracies as already seen in Europe. The crisis of an increasingly insolvent entitlement state. That's what we have, increasingly insolvent entitlement states. Is there a liberal listening to this show who does not recognize that the ever bigger government cannot be sustained? So what is their answer? They don't believe that. That's the point. They don't believe that because there are always rich people to tax. So they do not believe that the ever-increasing state is in any way a threat. Nobel Prize winner in economics, Paul Krugman of the New York Times, believes that we didn't spend enough. Europe is not spending enough. The government is not big enough. And believes we should print more money. Nobel Prize in economics. On the contrary, Obama is the apostle of the ever-expanding state. His speech was an ode to the collectivity. Remember, I kept pointing that out. We. What was it? It wasn't even we. What was it? The community? What were the words that he used? The collective action, all of those. But by that he means only government, not the myriad voluntary associations. This is the point I was making earlier. Religious, cultural, charitable, artistic, advocacy ad infinitum. That are the glory of the American system. The glory of the American system, the lights of that glory are being extinguished, my friends. How many kids even know what a Rotary Club is? Really? Or a Kiwanis Club, or a Lions Club. Ask the average graduate of a college. the left has reshaped America since 1960. Here's a statistic since 1960 from Robert Samuelson, who is so assiduously non-Democrat or non-Republican that he says publicly, we've had him on a number of times, he writes for the Washington Post, he doesn't even vote, lest he be not impartial in his comments in his comments and commentaries. Over the 50-plus years since 1960, government payments of cash, goods, and services to others, that's entitlements, have been growing twice as fast as overall personal income. Government transfers now account for nearly 18% of all personal income in America, up from 6% in 1960. What do we have to show for it? Almost $1 out of every $5 that an American makes is actually not made, it's taken. Think we're better for that? If you're on the left, you do. But my task is to clarify the difference. Most dynamic religion of the last 100 years is leftism. And it is certainly true in the United States, and it is true in parts of Christianity and Judaism in America as well, where leftism has conquered, and the shell is Christian, or the shell is Jewish, but the content is leftism. For Obama, nothing lies between, this is really powerful. For Obama, nothing lies between the citizen and the state. It's a desert within which the isolated citizen finds protection only in the shadow of Leviathan, the big state. Put another way, the speech is the perfect homily for the marriage of Julia. Remember Julia? The Obama campaign's atomized citizen, coddled from cradle to grave? Yep. The marriage of Julia and the state. I'm Dennis Prager. Hello, my friends. We have some of these articles up at the DennisPrager.com website. Today's Paul Krugman. I didn't even read it, but I just did. Sad to say, he writes, GOP control of the House means that we won't do what we should be doing. Spend more, not less. Yep. As I say almost every day, leftism is rooted in emotion, not reason. This week's decision to allow women into combat positions is a perfect example. As I have said, and I will continue to say, if people believe that there is really no difference and there are so many women qualified to do that, there should be all women's units and all men's units. The number of pregnancies now in the armed forces is alarming. Latest report on that. And I understand it. They're human beings. The circumstances are ideal to promote sex. They are. My issue isn't sex. I'm neither a prude nor even I'm not a prude, and I'm libertarian. You do what you do privately. I have standards that I will advocate, but I don't judge your private behavior in that regard. So the issue isn't sex. The issue is, if there's sex, then there isn't good fighting. When sex is on the mind, you're attracted to the woman next to you in combat. It's very different. It's just very different. The irony is the New York Times editorial says that both equality and common sense dictate that decision. Common sense? We have lacked common sense all of these centuries in not having women in the same units as men fighting. See? They have, I told you, again, this is a mantra of mine. The reason the self-esteem movement emanated from the left is that the left has such self-esteem. We are brighter, kinder, finer, more moral, more compassionate, more decent, more accepting, more tolerant, more open than anyone who opposes us. And we have more common sense as well. Just as common sense dictates the redefinition of marriage. All of these millennia, societies lacked common sense in not marrying men with men and women with women. Yes, indeed. That's why we need the Happiness Hour, which is coming up next on Desk Your Show.